"You don't belong here." The words hit harder than the PA announcements overhead. Gate C-14 froze. A manager in a navy vest jabbed his finger toward a black woman in a gray NYU sweatshirt. In her hand, still visible to everyone, was a freshly scanned boarding pass. Behind her, a uniformed officer pressed closer, radio at his shoulder. The crowd shifted like a single organism. Phones rose, eyes locked in. The woman didn't flinch. She lifted her phone to her ear, posture steady. Not begging, not defensive, just anchored. "Step aside, ma'am," the manager said, voice flat but sharp. "Premium boarding is reserved for verified passengers. You can't just walk in here with that." His glance swept over her sweatshirt and sneakers like evidence against her. The officer spoke into his mic, louder than necessary. "Possible fraud attempt. Passenger refusing to comply." His phrasing was deliberate, almost rehearsed. Passengers 3 rows back gasped. The black woman lowered her gaze briefly, then spoke not to him, but into her phone. "Run the verification again." Her voice was low, calm, yet carried a weight the room couldn't ignore. The manager scoffed. He reached out, plucking the boarding pass from her hand like seizing contraband. "We'll hold this until security clears you." He folded it once, slid it behind his clipboard, and squared his shoulders as if the paper had just convicted her. Murmurs rippled through the boarding lane. A college student whispered, "But it beeped green. I saw it." A mother shifted her toddler on her hip, muttering, "This isn't right." The manager's tone rose, meant for the whole gate. "People try this trick all the time. Flash a fake pass, claim a premium seat. Not today." Every eye turned toward her. And still she didn't raise her voice. Because this wasn't the first time. At 21, she had been waved away from a hotel lobby in Charlotte told her jeans didn't look executive. At 35, a banker flagged her transfer as suspicious, despite perfect documentation. And now, in an airport she partly owned, the cycle played again. The officer adjusted his stance. The manager crossed his arms. The crowd buzzed louder, recording, waiting for her to crack. But she didn't. Instead, she pressed the phone tighter to her ear and said quietly, "It's happening." The tension shifted. Authority had staged the theater of removal. But the woman they didn't know was scripting something far greater. The silence cracked when the manager raised his voice again. "Officer, remove her from the gate." It wasn't a request. It was a verdict delivered before evidence, before reason. The officer stepped closer, hand brushing against the woman's elbow as though guiding her away like lost luggage. But she didn't move. Her phone still to her ear, her voice carried a quiet counterpoint to his command. "Proceed with verification. Escalate to protocol." The words didn't sound like panic. They sounded like steps in a plan. Passengers stirred. A man in a business suit 2 rows back spoke up. "Hold on, I saw her pass scan green. You can't just take it." His voice trembled, but it was loud enough to ripple through the crowd. The manager snapped around, eyes narrowing. "Sir, mind your own travel. We're handling a security breach." A young woman clutching a boarding group ticket muttered, "That's not what it looks like." She lifted her phone higher, recording openly now. The officer cleared his throat. "Ma'am, if you don't cooperate, we'll have to detain you until we confirm your status." The black woman raised her eyes for the first time, locking on his. "You already confirmed it. The system did. Green means cleared." Her voice cut through the terminal hum like steel sliding from a sheath. The manager scoffed again, waving a dismissive hand. "Machines glitch? We don't let anyone in without a look that matches the part." He caught himself, but too late. The words hung in the air, "without a look that matches." Gasps spread. A teenager whispered, "He really said that?" Phones kept recording. The woman exhaled, not angry, not shaken. She turned slightly, as if speaking to herself, but the whole gate heard. 20 years and the language hasn't changed, only the uniforms have. The officer shifted uncomfortably. The manager doubled down, thrusting her folded boarding pass into his clipboard. "Policy is policy. You can leave voluntarily, or security will escort you." But something was happening beyond his sightline. The woman's phone glowed faintly. A voice on the other end spoke, clear enough for the nearest passengers to hear. "Verification confirmed. Ownership credentials pending. Protocol is live." The manager froze, just for a breath. Ownership? Credentials? His frown cracked for the briefest second. The woman lowered the phone slightly, eyes still steady. "You think this is about a seat? It's about how you see me." Murmurs swelled into voices. She's right. This isn't procedure, it's profiling. A man at the window raised his voice. You can't erase a passenger because you don't like her sweatshirt. The tension shifted again, heavier, like storm air thickening before lightning. The manager clenched his jaw. Enough. Officer, escort her out. But the officer hesitated now, his radio crackling with static, his hand not quite steady on her arm. He looked at the folded boarding pass in the clipboard, then at the phones surrounding him, then at her face still calm, still unbroken. And for the first time, he wasn't sure whose command to follow. The air around gate C14 grew heavier, almost electric. The officer's hesitation had opened a crack, and through it came the voices of the crowd. She paid for that seat, someone shouted from the back. A woman near the glass windows raised her phone higher. I've got the whole thing. Scanner beeped green, clear as day. The manager's face flushed red. Turn those cameras off. This is a restricted matter. His voice wavered. Less command, more desperation. But no one lowered their phones. If anything, more rose into the air like torches. The black woman remained still, her presence the eye of the storm. Her voice was calm, but carried far. You can silence me, but you cannot silence them. She gestured lightly to the circle of passengers now filming. A young man in a hoodie stepped forward, his phone trembling in his hands. Sir, I watched you pull her pass. You didn't even check the system twice. His voice cracked, but his truth hit hard. The manager snapped. Security doesn't need your commentary. Stand back. The officer's radio buzzed again. He pressed it close, listening. The static gave way to a clipped voice. Stand by for directive. Internal review engaged. His brow furrowed. He looked at the woman, then at the manager. Something had shifted behind his eyes. The manager sensed it too. He leaned closer to the officer, whispering sharply. If you don't act now, we lose control of this gate. But the officer didn't move. The woman raised her phone once more. This time, her speaker was on. The voice from the other end was clear, authoritative. Protocol verified. Board of Directors have been notified. Documenting all language used at Gate C14. Gasps echoed. A passenger whispered, Did she just say Board of Directors? The manager stiffened. That's nonsense. Some stunt. But his tone was thinner now, less sure. The woman's gaze lifted, steady as stone. Not a stunt. A record. For the first time, applause broke out, not full, not unanimous, but enough. 2 claps, then 3, then a handful of passengers clapping in rhythm, not for spectacle, but solidarity. The manager's mask cracked. His jaw tightened, his hand gripping the clipboard like a lifeline. This isn't over. The woman tilted her head slightly, unshaken. You're right. It isn't. The crowd leaned in, phones capturing every twitch of power shifting in real time. What had started as a quiet attempt to erase a single passenger was now unraveling into something much bigger, a public reckoning at 30,000 feet before the plane had even left the ground. And the manager? His authority, once absolute, was slipping through his fingers with every recording light burning red. The applause fractured the silence, and with it, the balance of power. Phones glowed from every angle. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore, they were documenting, amplifying. The manager's voice cracked as he tried to regain ground. Enough! All of you, sit down. This woman is not a verified passenger. She is attempting to defraud this airline. But the words didn't land the way they had before. Not after the slip about looking the part. Not after passengers saw the scanner glow green. Not after his own hands pocketed her boarding pass without so much as a second check. From the corner, a young flight attendant trainee stepped forward, nerves plain on her face. Her voice trembled, but it carried. I saw her pass scan valid. Twice. She belongs here. The gate area erupted murmurs, shouts, the unmistakable rush of people realizing they weren't imagining the injustice. The manager turned on the trainee like a hawk. Stay in your lane, rookie. You don't know procedure. But the damage was done. A witness had spoken. The woman, calm as ever, turned slightly, her phone still lit. The voice on speaker returned, crisp and deliberate. Escalation logged. Manager's conduct under review. Authorization standing by. The officer froze, caught between the radio in his hand and the recording devices all around him. He cleared his throat, stepping back a pace. The woman finally lifted her eyes to the manager fully. Her tone was still soft, but now sharpened with unmistakable weight. You claimed fraud without checking your own system. You took my pass, refused to re-verify, and called for removal. Tell me, what exactly do you think you'll write in that report? The manager's mouth opened, but no words came out. His clipboard shook slightly in his grip. Passengers didn't wait. "She's right," someone called. "You're lying and we've got proof," another shouted. The hum of outrage had turned into a wave, surging across the terminal space. The woman stepped forward, just one measured pace, and said quietly enough that everyone leaned in to hear, "You mistook my silence for submission. That was your last mistake." Gasps scattered through the crowd. The phrase hit like a gavel. The officer's radio crackled again, this time louder. "Confirm status. Credentials match executive profile. Repeat executive profile." The manager paled. "Executive? What executive?" The woman's lips curved into the faintest smile. She didn't answer. Not yet. She let the suspense breathe, let the silence prove stronger than any shout. Because in that silence, the truth was already unraveling. The officer's radio still buzzed, words hanging in the air like a verdict no one knew how to process. Executive profile. Passengers glanced at one another, phones trembling as they tried to capture every second. The manager's voice faltered. That doesn't mean anything. Anyone can claim to be somebody." His tone had shrunk, no longer the booming command that opened the confrontation, but a defense gasping for air. The black woman finally lowered her phone, pressing the screen once. The call didn't end, it went to speaker. A crisp female voice filled the gate area, reverberating against the glass walls. "Verification complete. Passenger is confirmed as primary shareholder of Horizon Airlines. Repeat, primary shareholder. Ownership level clearance." The terminal erupted. Gasps, shouts, even laughter broke through the tension like shattered glass. One man whispered, "Shareholder? Did she just say owner?" A teenager shouted, "Oh my God, she runs the place." The manager's clipboard slipped from his hand, clattering onto the tile. The woman didn't smile, didn't gloat. She simply straightened, standing taller, her calm presence swallowing the chaos around her. "You wanted proof," she said evenly. "Now you have it." The officer stepped back fully now, his radio slack in his grip. His eyes flicked to the manager, then to the woman, then back again, as if waiting for someone to give an order he could still trust. From the crowd, a voice rang clear. "She belongs here more than any of us," another followed. "This is her airline." Applause broke out, louder than before, undeniable now. The manager shook his head violently, desperation clawing through his face. "This is staged. It has to be staged." He turned toward the officer, shouting, "Don't listen to this circus. She forged something, she hacked." The woman cut him off, her tone sharp but never raised. "Careful. Every word you add is another nail in your own coffin." "How?" The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Passengers held their breath. The crisp voice on the phone returned, colder now. "Gate manager ID confirmed. Conduct under review. Effective immediately. Privileges suspended pending disciplinary action." The manager staggered back a step as his own badge beeped red against the scanner beside the podium. He swiped again, frantic. Red. Again. Red. His authority evaporated in real time, witnessed by 200 passengers and a dozen live stream feeds. The woman's gaze never left him. "You wanted me removed, but it's you who no longer belongs at this gate." Phones caught every angle. Passengers clapped. Some cheered, others whispered in awe. And yet, she remained still, her calm louder than the uproar around her. For the first time, the manager realized he wasn't just losing control of a situation. He was losing his place in it. The red denial beep echoed louder than any siren. Once, twice, 3 times as the manager swiped his badge. Each failure was another crack in his authority. Passengers leaned forward, recording every humiliating second. From the back of the gate, someone shouted, "He's locked out!" Applause followed, sharp and unrelenting. The officer stepped away from the woman now, his stance uncertain. His eyes had lost their earlier steel. He spoke into his radio, quieter this time, as if ashamed. "Gate authority suspended. Confirmed." The words carried, though, and the crowd latched onto them instantly. "She told you," a woman near the window said, phone still filming. "She told you who she was." The manager's face flushed crimson. He spun toward the passengers, hands out as if to shush them. "This isn't real. Don't you see? She planned this. She's manipulating." "Manipulating?" The black woman finally spoke, her voice cutting clean through the noise. You accused me without evidence. You seized my pass. You called security on me for existing. And now that the truth is visible, you call it manipulation? The applause grew louder, fueled by her words. A man in a leather jacket clapped deliberately, each strike like a hammer. Others joined until the terminal pulsed with sound. The trainee attendant, still near the podium, found her courage. She's right. I watched the scan myself. Twice. You ignored it. Her voice, once shaky, had steadied under the weight of solidarity. The manager turned on her, voice sharp. You're finished. You'll never work in this industry again. But the officer spoke up before she could answer. His voice was low, steady. No. She told the truth. You didn't. The silence that followed was suffocating for the manager. For the passengers, it was oxygen. The woman lifted her phone again, her speaker still live. The corporate voice returned, cold and final. Gate manager privileges revoked. Security override complete. Awaiting further instruction from primary shareholder. A passenger whistled. Another laughed, disbelief spilling into joy. The woman looked at the officer. Do your duty. He hesitated, then turned not to her, but to the manager. His voice was firm now. Sir, step away from the podium. The crowd erupted, some cheering, others chanting softly, Step away, step away. The manager froze, caught between rage and terror. You can't do this. You can't humiliate me like this. The woman's gaze was unyielding. You did that yourself. All I did was stand still. Phones caught the moment the officer gently guiding the manager back, away from the podium he once commanded. The applause thundered. For the passengers, it wasn't just about her victory. It was about theirs, because for the first time, justice hadn't been delayed. It had unfolded right there at Gate C-14, in real time. The manager's protests grew louder as the officer nudged him back. His voice, once authoritative, now cracked with desperation. This is a setup. You think one glitch in the system makes her the boss? She doesn't look like an executive, she looks like... He stopped himself, but too late. The words had already poisoned the air. Phones caught it. Gasps erupted like sparks hitting dry grass. A teenager near the window muttered, "He was really about to say it." Another whispered, "Unbelievable." The officer's jaw tightened. He stepped in closer, his tone sharper now. "Sir, stop talking. You're making it worse for yourself." But the manager couldn't stop. He thrashed against the tide of his own unraveling, shouting at the crowd. "You're all being fooled! You'll regret siding with her!" His arms flailed as if he could swat away the dozen red recording lights surrounding him. The woman didn't move. She didn't need to. Her silence was a mirror, reflecting his collapse for everyone to see. Then she spoke, her voice steady, not loud, but carried. "You say I don't look like an executive, that's familiar." Her eyes drifted, not to him, but somewhere deeper, somewhere years away. "When I was 16, I sat in a hotel lobby in Charlotte, Sunday best, waiting for my parents to park the car. A clerk walked up and told me, 'This area is for guests only,' I explained. But she didn't listen. They escorted me outside, like I was a trespasser." The terminal hushed. Even the manager fell silent, his chest heaving. "I stood on the sidewalk in the cold that night," she continued, her voice softer now. "And I made myself a promise that I would build something no one could shut me out of again." A murmur rippled through the crowd, sympathy, anger, recognition. A woman holding her daughter whispered, "That happened to me too." The manager shook his head violently, desperate to reclaim ground. "That's just a story. It doesn't prove anything." But the passengers weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her, at the calm strength in her posture, at the clarity in her eyes. She turned back toward him, her voice sharpening again. "You mistook silence for weakness. You mistook clothing for worth. And now you're mistaking truth for theater. Every mistake you made wasn't about me, it was about you." The applause burst forth like a wave, loud, unstoppable. It rolled over the gate area, drowning his protests, lifting her words into permanence. The officer stepped forward, firmer this time. "Sir, you're done here." The manager's shoulders sagged. His face, once burning with arrogance, now pale with the weight of realization. And the woman? She hadn't moved an inch. Yet she had shifted the entire room. The manager's voice had collapsed into mutters, but the damage was already carved into the air. Passengers weren't debating anymore. They had chosen a side, and it wasn't his. The black woman lifted her phone again, the speaker still active. Her tone was calm, precise. Nia, escalate, begin internal audit. Timestamp everything from the first accusation. A clear voice replied through the device, professional and unwavering. Understood. Audit file initiated. Gate manager's misconduct logged. Do you authorize suspension of access privileges? Every passenger within earshot leaned forward, drawn in like jurors awaiting a verdict. The officer's brows furrowed, but he didn't intervene. He was listening too. The manager lunged forward, his hands trembling. You can't. This isn't how things are done. You don't have that kind of authority. His words were raw now, stripped of control. The woman met his panic with stillness. Authority isn't borrowed, it's built. And mine was built long before this gate. Gasps swept through the crowd. The trainees, the business travelers, the families, they all knew they were hearing something far beyond a simple boarding dispute. The phone speaker chimed again. Primary shareholder authorization pending. Please confirm. She didn't look at her phone. She looked at him. The man who had taken her boarding pass called her a fraud, nearly had her escorted out like contraband. I confirm, she said softly. The terminal seemed to hold its breath. The voice on the phone was final. Confirmed. Gate manager access revoked. Effective immediately. Security notified. A red light blinked on the manager's badge again, louder this time, paired with a digital tone from the podium. The trainee gasped. The officer stepped back, as if witnessing a guillotine fall. The crowd erupted, some clapped, others shouted. Phones captured every pixel of his unraveling. A man in the corner whispered to his wife, I've never seen justice that fast. The manager's face drained of color. He pressed his badge again and again, each denial tone louder, harsher, crueler than the last. The woman tilted her head slightly, her voice steady. You tried to erase me with your clipboard, but this is my system, not yours. A woman in the crowd shouted, Say it again! Phones angled closer. The manager stumbled backward, muttering, This isn't happening. This can't be happening. But it was, and no one in Gate C14 would ever forget it. The black woman lowered her phone, silence reclaiming her presence. She didn't raise her arms, didn't shout victory. She didn't need to. The room itself had declared it for her. The red denial tone still echoed in the gate, pulsing like a heartbeat that no longer belonged to him. The manager stood frozen, badge limp in his hand, his mouth working but no words forming. Then the ripple spread. Two gate attendants exchanged panicked glances, their hands hovering over keyboards they suddenly weren't sure they had clearance to touch. One whispered, If she's really shareholder level. The other cut her off. Don't say it out loud. But the fear in their eyes had already said enough. The crowd, however, had no such hesitation. They roared. Phones panned in from every angle, capturing the man's collapse, the attendant's unease, the calm figure at the center who hadn't moved more than a step since it all began. Unbelievable, shouted a passenger in a denim jacket. He tried to humiliate her, and now look. A young mother raised her voice, holding her daughter on her hip. This is what happens when you judge by appearances. My kid's gonna remember this moment. The applause swelled again, filling the sterile gate area with something that felt alive, charged, unstoppable. The black woman remained still. Her phone was silent now, the line on hold, but its glow felt like a presence watching over every corner of the gate. She didn't need to speak yet, the room itself had turned into her witness stand. The officer broke the silence first. His voice was quieter than before, but it carried. Ma'am, if you are who they say you are, then we've all just made a very serious mistake. Her eyes met his, unflinching. Not all of you. Some chose silence. Some chose complicity, but not all. She gestured slightly toward the trainee attendant, who stood straighter under her recognition. The manager finally found his voice, a hoarse whisper. You're lying. This is some trick. You're nobody. The crowd booed. Some outright laughed. Phones caught the desperate denial in his face, the sweat shining under the fluorescent lights. The woman exhaled, calm, collected. She reached down, picked up the torn boarding pass from where it had fallen, and held it between two fingers. You called this a fraud. You tore it up because you couldn't believe someone like me belonged here. But this scrap of paper was never the proof. The terminal hushed again. Every phone tilted forward. The proof, she continued, her voice cutting like glass, is that while you tried to keep me from boarding, the airline was already mine to begin with. Gasps ricocheted across the room. Some shouted, She owns it! Others clapped so hard their palms echoed against the glass walls. The attendants at the desk stiffened, eyes wide. The officer's radio crackled again, confirming what no one wanted to say aloud. Executive presence verified. Owner status confirmed. And with that, the room's last shred of doubt collapsed. The gate had turned into an arena. The hum of jet engines outside was drowned out by clapping, shouts, the unrelenting chorus of phones streaming live. The two attendants at the podium froze, their fingers stiff above the keyboard. One whispered, "She's the owner. We just denied the owner boarding." The other shook her head slowly, eyes glassy with fear. "We're done." Passengers pressed closer, no longer pretending to wait in line. Some were chanting now, voices overlapping. "Let her board! Let her board!" Others jeered at the manager, whose flushed face looked smaller with every recording light aimed at him. The officer had stepped fully aside, his hands folded, his posture no longer threatening. He wasn't guarding her anymore. He was guarding everyone else from the truth of what they'd just witnessed. The black woman stood at the center, steady as ever. In her hand, the torn boarding pass looked almost symbolic proof of the humiliation attempted, not of her right to fly. She raised it slightly, and the room stilled again. "This," she said evenly, "was never your decision to tear." Her words hung in the air like scripture. Phones zoomed in. Even the children quieted. The manager tried one last desperate move, his voice cracking. "She's lying. You're all falling for some—" But his badge still blinked red, and every denial tone that followed him was louder than his protests. The crowd answered with laughter, boos, a tidal wave of disbelief at his arrogance. Then her phone lit again. The crisp voice returned, amplified by the silence. "Final confirmation. Primary shareholder, Horizon Airlines. Authorization privileges, total." Gasps thundered through the room. The chanting turned to cheers. Someone shouted, "She owns the whole damn airline!" A man lifted his phone toward the ceiling, yelling into his live stream, "You're watching history happen." The woman lowered her phone slowly, her gaze sweeping the crowd. Calm, controlled, unbreakable. She looked at the officer first. "Thank you for stepping back." His nod was small, almost apologetic. She turned to the attendants, who shrank beneath her eyes. "You will have to answer for your part." They swallowed hard, neither daring to speak. And finally, she faced the manager. He stood trembling, his once crisp uniform now damp with sweat, his clipboard abandoned at his feet. Her voice was steady, but it cut deeper than any shout. "You tried to erase me in a terminal I own. You mistook my silence for ignorance. You mistook my patience for permission. And you've just discovered how wrong you were." The terminal erupted. Applause, cheers, chants louder than ever, rolling through the glass and steel until the entire gate seemed to shake. And yet, she didn't raise her arms, didn't bask in the chaos. She simply stood, holding the torn pass between her fingers, a quiet reminder of everything that had just collapsed around him. The storm of applause faded into a tense quiet, all eyes fixed on her. The gate no longer felt like an airport checkpoint, it felt like a courtroom, and she was both judge and witness. The black woman lifted her phone again, her tone unwavering. "Nia, proceed. Immediate suspension for all involved. Lock their access and record this incident for legal review." The voice on speaker answered crisply, each syllable amplified by the pin-drop silence. "Confirmed. Gate manager suspended. Attendants Hayes and Patel flagged. Access revoked now." Beep. Beep. The manager's badge lit red again, this time permanent, final. He swiped in vain, each denial tone sharper than the last. Behind him, the two attendants tried their badges too. Both glowed red. Their gasps were audible, their panic undeniable. The crowd erupted, some laughed, others clapped, some even shouted, "Justice!" The scene was surreal, power shifting in real time. Not in a boardroom, not in a headline, but here in a fluorescent-lit terminal. The officer exhaled slowly, almost relieved. He spoke low, but the mics of a dozen phones caught it. "It's over." The manager's voice cracked, desperate. "You can't do this. You don't have the authority." She met his panic with stillness. "I don't need to raise my voice to prove authority. The system already did it for me." Passengers clapped again, some stomping feet now, the rhythm echoing like a verdict. The manager dropped to pleading, his arrogance gone. "Please, don't end my career over this. I made a mistake." Her gaze didn't soften. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice, and now you live with the result. The two attendants tried to speak at once. Apologies, excuses, half-truths spilling out. But the crowd shouted them down. We saw what you did. You stood by and let it happen? EMSO. The woman raised her hand, and silence returned instantly. Her presence alone commanded it. You all tried to define who belonged here. You decided appearance was proof, but the only thing you proved was your own prejudice. Her words landed like stones in water, rippling through the crowd. Some passengers nodded, others whispered. Everyone recorded. She turned back to her phone. Nia, note this. Permanent bar from Horizon Employment. Effective immediately. Logged, came the reply. Access terminated. Legal files updated. The attendants slumped, shock written across their faces. The manager shook his head, muttering, This isn't real. This can't be real. But it was real. And 200 passengers had just watched it unfold with their own eyes. The woman lowered her phone. She didn't look at them again. She didn't need to. Their silence was proof enough that the sentence had already been delivered. The gate was silent again, but it wasn't the silence of tension anymore. It was the silence of recognition, of awe. 200 passengers stood witness to a reversal, so complete it felt like history bending in real time. The black woman closed her phone, slipped it calmly into her sweatshirt pocket, and stood with the same quiet composure she had carried since the first accusation. Around her, the disgraced manager slumped in his seat, badge blinking uselessly red. The two attendants sat frozen, pale, their access gone. The officer cleared his throat, breaking the hush. His voice was softer now, almost respectful. Ma'am, would you like me to escort you to the jet bridge? She shook her head lightly. No need. I'll walk. As she stepped forward, the crowd parted instinctively, creating a clear path to the gate. Phones tilted to follow her. But this time, the recording wasn't about scandal. It was about reverence. She bent briefly, picking up the torn boarding pass from the floor. Holding it between her fingers, she addressed the crowd not with anger, not with triumph, but with the calm authority that had defined every second of this ordeal. You all saw what happened here. You saw how quickly judgment was passed. You saw how silence was mistaken for weakness, and you saw the truth rise anyway. The words rippled through the passengers. Some nodded. Others clapped softly. She lifted the torn pass once more. Respect isn't printed on a ticket. It isn't worn on a uniform. It isn't granted by a clipboard. Respect is owed to every human being who walks through this gate. Remember that before you judge the next passenger. A beat of silence followed, and then applause erupted, louder than anything before. It rolled through the glass walls, through the concourse, through the phones that streamed to thousands online. The woman didn't bow, didn't linger. She simply handed the torn pass to the trainee attendant, who held it like something sacred. Their eyes met, and the trainee whispered, barely audible, Thank you. The black woman nodded once, then turned and walked down the jet bridge, her steps unhurried, her presence unshaken. Behind her, the crowd kept clapping, the sound chasing her until she disappeared beyond the gate. And in that moment, one truth settled over every witness. She hadn't just won a seat on a plane. She had dismantled prejudice in real time. Quietly, completely, irreversibly.